Hey YouTube, my name is Denisio Matrenga as Provice Roken, Prevent from Flow, and today what I wish to get into is a subject of, um, so essentially a number of things have been on my mind very much recently, but in thinking of the things that have been on my mind and getting into them, um, it rooted down to essentially one thing in which um, I have been in a willing stance and a pursuit to portray, and I found that one way or another, there was a bunch of soft ways of the universe simply telling me um, that it wasn't to them that it was that I was to tell it, and that they were open and working with it and giving me information. But I believe that that was for me to get pieces, but to not pursue it in a direct stance towards um, any particular person. And so I think that it is a very great time to use this to portray my truth in the space in which I portray my truth. And so with that, just to let it out there, I don't mean to offend anybody. I just, there's a lot of things on my mind and my understanding and my knowledge and pursuit of knowledge that I have learned to come to many conclusions, and that it may rest on my heart, but I take a stance of love and respect in all areas in which I can. So um, uh, simply when I wish to portray my truth, that um, that I wish to portray that it leads to a state of love and a state of greatness, and that that is the intent behind it. And so simply what I wish to get into is, in one way or another, I've gotten into this mainly with religious people, but also not. Um, and not particularly by my intentions with the ones that aren't necessarily they'd bring it up. And so so that I don't bring it up with them in any sort of way to make an offense to anybody or anything, that I wish to, go through this. And there is no offense. I'm just putting out the information out there for speculation, and I have no intents against anybody. Um, and so what it is the Israelites. There's a whole misunderstanding of the Hebrew Israelites and what has gone down. And so let me just start off that let me take you back to the Roman Empire. Well, actually, I could take you back further. The Egyptians mixed with the Hebrew Israelites were typically of the minority population, of course, and that these Egyptians in the royal family, typically the ones that we see in the royal lineage today, the more royal you are, the more potent lineage you typically have of King Tut. And what I mean by that is, especially in the Brits, more so is what I'm speaking of. And so getting into that, essentially, King Tut is the boy king. And a reference to that is the pharaohs were considered as God on earth in their society. And so either that means one of two things. They believe that they are of a lineage of, this descent that is this essentially descent of a god that was this god of sorts was half human, half god. And essentially humans are equivalent to gods. And so this hybrid was essentially, it refers to why the Pope wears the fish hat. And they say that, oh yeah, it has to do with the Christians and, riding the fish halfway, and if you completed it, then it was okay to speak. That's because You know, a lot of these concepts, if you portrayed them to other people, you die. And the only difference about that and today is that you have people acting on their amygdalas, but not um, that much, because their amygdala is the fight or flight, and they, especially in America, they are very sensitive to that because of how it's developed, how they've been developed, and so essentially that. But they don't kill because they're all about freedom of opinion and freedom of choice, and love, and all the fun jazz, and it's great. But the thing is that this fish creature is a reference to aquatic species of essentially aliens, and these aliens are um, not like fish, but more like frogs in their reference of appearance and whatnot. These like frog-like beings. Essentially, they made, I think it was eight, so 4 and 4 androgynous human frog hybrids, and um, so these hybrids were like humans and gods, but technically they were just robots, if you really think of it. What I mean by that is robots, as in a sense of they were programmed to just do a certain will and do a certain action, which was to come down here and mate with us. That was it. Um, it wasn't that they had all these like things that they were learning and came to mate with us like the fallen angels. They was just that was their program. And two of them, a male and a female, already both androgynous, decided to mate together and have a kid. And the only problem with that is that they were programmed to mate with us. And that's an issue if they're just robots, that it's technically an error. And their kid turned it out to be essentially retarded. And I'm not making any offense because the royalty that lit out this information in Europe gladly accept that. And so I'm not making this stuff up. I'm just pointing it out there. And they are proud of that. And so either they believe that this Tut is the reincarnation, or he is the kid. He is this being. And that is why they try to make a certain potency and a sort of competition in all the royal descents, including in the American bloodlines. Every single president is related to King Tut and has a portion of this lineage. And the one with the most potent lineage always wins. Always. And, it's like it seems almost random, but if that's a factor of it, every single time they win, right? And then it's a matter of votes. Those votes go to the electoral college, who takes those into consideration and is supposed to base their votes off of those. They're supposed to. They don't. It's just a given. It's kind of like fair play, right? The pharaohs, like, they would, every time like they had a battle with their people, they're like, hey, when we run across you again, we're gonna kill you. We're gonna kill you. It was just a fair call, and that was something the pharaohs did. That's what we see in subconsciously within TV. They make a lot of statements, a lot of things to recognize as like a warning. It's like a fair warning. That way they don't feel responsible. It kind of has to do with the Luciferian belief, but not pointing anybody towards any Luciferian thing. I'm just stating as is because that is a Luciferian tactic. Simply is. And so essentially that why is it that this electoral college does that, but then at the same time the one that always wins is the one with the most potent bloodline, and then on top of that It's always one and then the other. Why do you think that is? You think about it, it's no matter how moderate they may be, they make it look like the sides are opposite. And it's horrible because they confuse the crap out of people, and people are obsessed with dwelling into it. And the whole thing is a game. It's totally BS. And then you realize how exotically, um, it is just developed to just be a corrosive, degrading thing, to have it to where you have to pick a side, or make it look like you have to pick a side, make them look like they're opposing sides. And because it's not just black and white, it's a little bit of both. And then um, then at the far ends, there's like the very physical attributes, and the very mental attributes that may apply to them are almost contradictive, you would think, to being an actually moderate. And then when you get to being more moderate in their actions, these presidents, they do it perfectly aligned to where it's like it's radical on both sides. So how is it moderate? And so it's kind of just insanity. But enough of that. Essentially, is that they do it to where it may be moderate but radical on their side, and then moderate and radical on their side. So that way, if the next one were the same side as the other one, they would have tyranny every single time. That's how they set it up, that they prep for their side, like as if they're going to win, but they know they're not. What that is it's a form of disassociation and disassembling and breaking it down, and using a building of structure that is, it's not a tower, it is a gap. And so they're almost digging the hole, right? But the hole, the space, is their tower. Yeah. And so essentially, if you look at that it's almost so bad but also so good, right? But there's so many bad in the good. All these things that, if there was a Democrat after, if say Hillary won after Obama, all these things that they not only incorporate on the mindset but also in the physical part of that mental process, which would be the law, the physical, right? In that sense, that it's very much it's very much a setup. But because it breaks it down, and the next one comes up and does the same thing for the other side, that what it is it's to bring it to be more moderate, so that they make the radical sides look as the normal side. So that way, when it's radical, it's like almost moderate for both sides with a chaotic twist. Because when you look at both radical, they make it look almost as if they're separate, but it's because they have like key aspects, but they are almost negative, that the way that they've broken it down makes them against each other, because that's the way their mind works. And so they know it's just chaos. It's kind of whack. Gives you a big thump on the head. But it's lovely because it's very refreshing, very good to learn. It can be a pain in the butt, but there's a lot of things you can learn from it, and it's almost ever evolving, just as when you get across any truth. And it's kind of scary, but it's not as scary in a sense of fear. It's more like the sense of surprise. It's just like in awe, just wow, And anyways, enough of that. So you see that lineage and whatnot. But so these Israelites, not the ones that I'll get back to the ones that mixed with the Egyptians later. Um, but so these Israelites, essentially in their lineage, they got to a point to where um, they were following the one true God, right? The transmutation, the Most High, and because Shem is the father of the Israelites, that Shem made a promise to his father Noah that he would obey in a sort of respect his his beliefs and whatnot and his God, right? Because but it was a matter of in humility and fear to the limits of their perception. So what that meant is that once they became more perceptually full because of their knowledge that came into fruition, it led them to this other God. That when this sense of the Israelites realized that the very physical aspect of that, oh, well, it doesn't line up with the Father, with our father Noah. So that means that um, you guys are doing something bad, because even though they were humble and afraid respectfully of the other God, they didn't need to have that fear, because they already knew that when you trust in God, the one true God, that you pretty much just, it's impermeable. It already does not exist. So you get to see that because you take off those limits from your perception. And but they didn't lose the humility. That was the thing. And so it was like, oh, because you're not because you feel that you're more superior. That's what they thought. They were like, oh, you feel that you're more superior because you're facing this other God now. And how it makes you superior is because you feel that you don't have these limits to your perception anymore. So that means that you don't have to um, pay attention to this God, because they totally understood it. They were just against it. They had hate against their own kind. And Esau started this and brought it to the Roman Empire. He started the Roman Empire by mixing with Japheth and Hamites. So Japhetic and Hamite descents. We know the Greeks are the descendants of Japheth. And I mean, not saying that Levi isn't in there. I'm just saying because Gentiles are all across all the nations. I'm just saying that Greeks are Japhetic in descent, and that Hamites are typically black. I can't say that there aren't any darks and aren't any lights in either one. I just know that Japheth gave birth to the lighter descents, and that not all these lighter descents are Japheth at all. Like, you can look at the Irish, for example, or the Scottish. That is just one example. But anyways, or a couple examples, even the Spaniards. Not all of them, of course, because there is a portion of each when they mix. But that wasn't the intention. They were Gentiles, and some of them were, the lost 10 tribes of Israel, and it was kind of put upon them. So they're not necessarily in any wrong state of being, and that would be like the Irish and the Scottish, for example. But losing that heritage of culture and understanding was a trait of Gentileness, and so it wasn't necessarily that maybe they adapted into a new fruition. It was the same thing, just in a different perspective. I cannot say, because I have not lived in those cultures. Not saying that that is a requirement. If I really wanted to get into it, I would. I would really have to correlate it and see how they evolved out over time, which is a matter of speculation, and be an interesting thing. But anyways, so this Esauic descent with Alexander the Great and some other descents, essentially he took over that land and enacted the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire, if you were black and you ruled in the Roman Empire, okay, let's just say dark skinned, that, because maybe that is more open, but even people in Africa that, Like you could just look it up. Jesus, just type in, was Jesus Ethiopian or whatever, and you can find that they knew him as dark-skinned, black. The thing is that the Bible won't speak about that because it doesn't care about skin color. It's not about that. That's because it was never physical to begin with. Well, I'm not saying that it isn't physical. I'm just saying that it was a kind of guide. It was like a thing that if you had an ideology that was already aligned with this, that when you read it in the understanding of the Hebrew dialect that was completely changed with these Jews, with these Arabs, and all these peoples that are actually descendants of Esau, which I'll get into, that it was changed. It was not only upside down and reversed, like flipped, but they added accents and removed accents, and that was just not a part of it. And so it changed the language quite a bit. But this Esau, essentially, he enacted a sort of mental structure that caused these Israelites to go against their own, persecute, maim, torture, kill, just ransack their own people. And I think it's interesting that afterwards and after all this, that the Israelites got cast out of there. Why do you think that was? Because they caused all that chaos, and all these people were technically Gentiles in a sort of another, and they were for all of this and whatnot because they were technically like almost against. That doesn't mean anything. It's just if Japheth was white and all his brothers were black and Noah was black and leprosy was around that made people pale, it's no wonder that he could have felt jealous of some sort, because he got the third of the land and Ham cursed his father and Ham got cursed back, but he didn't do anything wrong. Why would he get a third of the land? The third least, the least amount of land out of the three, even though he got a third of the world. And so, there's that part that is like, that kind of just frustration and whatever, that spirit, the ancestral spirit. And so that was picked out of essentially these Japhetic descents, and also Hamite, because Hamite, they probably felt, oh, well, I'm dark skinned too. Why don't I get all that? He's white, of course that he did, well, but why me? Or whatever. It's just a matter of speculation from information. It's all a basis of perspective, and that perspective can pass on, and so it's taking into consideration. And so with these Israelite descents that branched off, if you are dark and you have all this melanin that is just beyond greater than other melanin people, not saying it's better or anything, just in a absorption of the sun, it is more potent in that ability that they are going to be frustrated, that when they mix with these people that are of Japhetic descent, white descent, non-melanin descent, that you see that initially they get more gray and more ashy, that when it comes down to it, that once they actually take on, it's only in 4 generations, you look exactly like them, like the descent that you mix with, the lineage you mix with mixing cultures, 4 or 5, that they can become more pale than these people they mix with. So these Arabs, or these Israelites, they got sent out. Where did they go? They went to Europe, to Britain. I think it's funny that Britain and London are a sort of as above, so below in relation to Egypt, which is in Africa. And that's just funny. It's funny. It's sad, but it's funny. And so you take that in, right? And then they were cast out, right? but that was from a standpoint of knowledge, right? Because these people that casted them out were the people they made, but they were of the ones that wanted to be ignorant because they did that for whatever reasons they had, but then they wanted to be Gentiles. So instead of being Gentiles by getting kicked, or by sending themselves out of the land and taking on a culture, they took on a culture and set the Israelite lineage out of the land. And so this lineage went to Europe, and then the ones that stayed were typically of royal descent, but then that's why they did the mixing, because they were already of Tut and this Egyptian and whatnot, and so they did that, but that was to keep that lineage in check. But they were still of this Israelite descent, and so they took it on to keep on recycling it, doing that every second cousin crap. And then the ones that were of the minority, it still did with Freemasonry, because that was all around back then, that those ones kicked themselves out because of how they felt about the higher ups, which really were just of Tut, if you really realize it. They were mainly of Tut, right? And so they made that separation already, and then they migrate, so they become Gentiles. From this conscious standpoint, that when they mixed with them and became unconscious, right, they became Gentiles. And so those Gentiles were technically, because of this sort of inverse relationship, they took on that Israelite descent. I mean, they already had it, but they became the Israelites in this relationship. So those were the whites that came to America and did all this colonization, did all this kind of crazy jazz, and screwed a lot of people over. Why do you think that they took the slaves to America under the will of God? And I mean to say that, why did the slaves also come from the Roman Empire? Because they did. I mean, there was a lot of slaves all over and whatnot, but why did they get transferred over? That is an interesting thing. And so you look into that, then you look into these Puritans going into America and taking the slaves with them under the will of God, and then what? Then Christianity at that point was under Catholicism, and it wasn't initially. The Gnostics were not Catholics. Catholicism was paganism impregnating Christianity to form a religion, to form an ideology into a structure of reality, not your structure of reality as the ideology, impregnating all this as a sort of like a very permeable fluid thing, to where when you already have this and you dive right in, it molds to it, not this molding to this and then this molding to this, right? So they did that because they were already of that inverse structure. They were these Gentiles. They paradoxed inversely because of how they did what they did, and what it caused them getting cast out, and how it made them Gentiles, and how they used that subconsciously to pass on their own line. And so they go over to the Americas, and these Catholics and whatnot, all these people, it breaks down into different forms of Christianity, and you see that in the Americas. And then what happens? The freaking KKK, okay? The KKK, okay, first off, white people are way more white. Like the whites that came and colonized this place, they're way more white than Europeans. I mean, come on. If you were black, as in like you're already freaking pale, paler than the Greeks were. I mean, Greeks weren't as pale, but I mean, you know, as they actually moved on, they got more pale, because all these people were actually kind of dark. A lot of people don't know that. But these Israelites, after they mixed with the Greeks, they were way more pale than the Greeks, because that's what happens. Then they went and mated with these Europeans, which were already pale. They became more pale than them. Then On top of that, they got segregated. They got separated. They separated themselves in this paradoxical process. And that in itself already made them more pale because of that separation. That's just what happens when you branch off. You differentiate. But how do you differentiate? It's a relation of, what the past. Okay, so the past determines the future, and the future determines the moment, the present, right? And so that past determined a certain events of how things worked, and how those things worked and whatnot determined how they saw the future and how things running out, and that determined their present moment state. And because that past and a subconscious standpoint impregnated that it impregnated how their future outcome would come into fruition. That is just simple logic. and so essentially, that when they were here and this KKK went down, they were against the Catholics, right? Because of this paganism, right? So what do you think is interesting about that? The Gentiles, a property of Gentiles, right? That cast them away, right? They got sent to Europe. The Europeans, the ones that were the minority, technically the same as these other Gentiles, right? Instead of them casting out the higher ups, they casted themselves out, right? And so it's kind of a trip. And then they come over here, they hold certain beliefs and certain structures and whatnot, just a different basis, right? And an almost inverse basis. And then that takes on to the fruition of what? Certain properties of the inverse basis of the other Gentiles. So these other Gentiles, essentially, there's a relation between them that I can't even say they're Gentiles. I'm just using that for correlation to explain this. And that once it came into fruition to the KKK, that this was paganism, that they very much were against the Catholics, that they became against the Jews. And I feel like I need to do more research about why, but it's why the hate, it's like you're supposed to set an example. I know it was the culture and the times, but whatever, it's funny, but everybody has their problems and their history and whatnot, whatever it may be, whatever part, not everybody per se, but there's always the good and the bad. It's not perfect. And you can't say that this lineage is actually the lineage of Satan, even though that it applies to you indirectly and subconsciously, because how can you be a freaking pure soul? You be the only ones with souls, is what the KKK believed, if you're the descendants of the people you hate. It's like, get your logic together. I'm not trying to hate. I'm just trying to point it out. I'm saying that from their logical standpoint, whatever they correlated, sure, they probably had the logic in their own understanding of their world. That is the power of these ideologies being indoctrinated alongside mindsets from previous lineage, or from previous parts in your lineage. There were key points that set certain things into motion, key causes for effects. And so you look at these things and then you say, okay, well, they're against Jews because they're against Catholics. All right. I mean, maybe not because, but, and so they started killing melanated people, not necessarily blacks, Mexicans, and, all the other people that were from Central America, and came into California and all these other places. They killed them, they hung them, they tortured them, they did all these things. But the funny thing is that all those people, what are they descendants of? Melanated people. They are the descendants of the Mayans and Incans. Who are they the descendants of? The Olmecs. Who are the Olmecs? The freaking Israelites. The blacks. Does it paint a picture now? Okay. So, in that process, I don't know if it was like an understanding to hate blacks, whatever it was, or melanated people, but it is just interesting that maybe they thought that, and that, but the blacks that got into the slave trade were not a part of that lineage. That is the frustrating and not funny thing. It's kind of sad. The Byzantine empires with the Moors, they came to actually do the real bidding of mixing with the 10 tribes. When these Israelites got kicked out and were saying they were doing that work, they were just getting kicked out. The Moors were doing actually this work. They did that from a lineageal and after dealing with the tribulations and after dealing with all these things, that the ones that survived out of it, and what I mean by survive, they kept these cultures, they kept their mindset straight, they went through the tribulations and made it through. They went back to mix with the 10 tribes, the Byzantine Empire. That's what they did. That's what this whole problem about them was. They say, oh, that was the original ISIS. What? No, just no. That's what they want to teach you. I mean, there was probably things they did wrong, but they got attacked first. There was a lot of things about that. But anyways, they mixed with the Sicilians. The Sicilians, I'm just giving this for an example, but they mixed with many cultures along the Mediterranean, and I believe in Spain, and I'm not sure about the Irish, because the Irish were already of the 10 tribes, but I cannot state from lack of information, which means I need to research. But the Moors mixed with the Sicilians. The Sicilians were, yes, Canaanites because of what? So they were Phoenician. The Sicilians were the Phoenicians. That's what it was. The Phoenicians, as they were leaving and sailing and all these things, they went to Sicily and did their thing and dipped a couple of times. They believe that the Native Americans are Phoenician. That totally, it lines up, but it totally rewrites the whole Asia migration thing, because that's BS. That's BS. What it's talking about is it's totally fucking with history. It's saying that, I'm sorry for my language, it's totally saying that that these Israelites that came over and did their thing, and the way they migrated into Europe, the same way that not the Israelites that we know of this pure line, but these ones that screwed stuff up for the actual Israelites, that they are saying that was after the Ice Age. It is a total screw with the heads of people, because it totally indoctrinates what they want to indoctrinate. But they know that that's not even real. They don't even believe that for themselves. The people that cause this information to get spread, it totally defies logic. It totally defies the pyramids. The pyramids were built by the Hebrews. If you even look in the Jewish encyclopedia referring to these Jews, even in Israel and whatnot, they even acknowledge that the blacks were the ones that built the pyramids, and that they consider them their ancestors. And on top of that, the freaking corrosion on the pyramids had to be water damage, and it's up to 12,000 BC, if not before that. That totally messes up history. 10,000 BCE or BC was when they said the Ice Age ended. No, no. And it's not 2,000 years. Like, people really need to grasp an understanding by looking into information. And that's all that can be said. Um, and so these Moors, they were these tribulated descents. And so because these others separated from them, what they got in fruition from that is by dealing with these tribulations, they got release of these limits of their perception, because they dealt with all these things that were to put on the limits. Because if you were to accept those energies as your own, then it causes a fruition for the reaction to occur. It causes exactly what they want. And by doing the opposite, not in an opposition, or I wouldn't even say the opposite, it'd be the middle ground, which is actually the true opposite, the true healthiest state. That what it did is they knew all these things were to break them down and cause all these things, and that's why they just did not react. And they found a culture, found a love in all these things. It's just like the black people that came to America. They knew all these things were to break them down in so many ways, and what they had was such a beautiful hope and such a beautiful culture. Then you see white people tearing themselves down. They can't even agree. They can't even reason with themselves some of the times. And that's not to make an offense to anybody. It's just to point out a lineage of mindsets that have been set, and the ideologies that have been created to pass those mindsets on, even into any sort of lineage. And it's a very unstable and or corrosive thing. And I'm not saying it only applies to whites, because very much whites are good as well. It does not, that physical does not matter. It doesn't. It's like you see in America, it's come to a verge to where white people are everybody who is not dark. That is not true at all. Not true at all. Yet you're white. You are white, if that is the case. It's totally screwy. It's not. It kind of sucks, but it is what it is. Because everybody has their own tribulations. Even if you are, say, of these 10 tribes, right? These 10 tribes, and somewhere along the way that you got this Moorish descent and you went on your way, that you still look white. It means that you go through these tribulations, and it is what it is. It doesn't matter, because it's so illusory anyways. It does not exist, and that's the thing. So these Moors mix with these Sicilians, these Phoenicians, just one of these parts where these 10 tribes went, which are very much from Spain, very much, as well as the surrounding peoples. And then, and they mixed with them after coming there and whatnot. They mixed there in 3000 BC and in 1100 BC. And in that, it's like when they came there, it was funny how they lined up with all the people from those islands that came there. And they mixed there. But, they were cast out. And so it was like that descent was of that accepted them and embraced them. It was like almost proud, that descent of Japheth that was proud that Shem got that to be able to reign it on, that maybe there was a part to where Shem was, showed his stature in comparison to the brothers, and Japheth looked up to him. I don't know. I mean, maybe I do subconsciously. But then there was that. Then there was the Phoenicians, who had all this great embrace and culture and everything, and the Carthaginians, who were their ancestors after all these things. They mixed there in 1100 BCE, as well as 800 to 880 to 1000 and something 80, and almost 1100 80, and in the 1400s to the 1600s. And so the descent in which I speak of a Japhetic descent, not Japhet, but a Gentile descent. Before all these Roman Empire jazz and nonsense of the Albanians, they came there and went through tribulations of not mixing with any people, and the Arboreshi people went there and did not have sex with anybody. And it was from not a physical basis, but from a spiritual basis. And they knew they were Gentiles, and they wanted to get their stature back up. And so they go in there in 1200 to 1400, and or of that sort, and they were hunted for 500 years. And no, maybe they came in the 1400s or a little bit before that. I believe I had it. So, and then either way, they were there for the 200 years when the Sicilians mixed with the Moors. They were hunted by the Catholics. They were there for the 200 years until the 1600s. And from the 1600s and the 1800s, those that were from the physical standpoint of like the abstinence, they were like, they came to fruition that, oh, like mixing races is not a thing. It should not be a thing. But those from the spiritual basis went and mixed with the Sicilians. They, from the 1600s to the 1800s, if you know anything about the Jews and the Arabs and all this stuff, they believe, especially the Jews, they believe that it's the matriarchal, the mother's side, that passes on this thing, because the son takes from the mother. And so from that, the Moors, when they mixed, they gave their sons back to their homeland. They gave their daughters to the Sicilians. And the Sicilians, I wouldn't have doubted they did the same, because they already knew about the purpose of that. They already knew about all of this. And they knew about this structure. They knew about a lot of fruition of things. And so the Albanians that mixed with these descents went to the Americas in the hundreds and so on. They were, I believe they were cast out more than the Sicilians were. And they're way more hit up than the Moors are. It doesn't bring anything into notion except that it is what it is. And so my lineage that came here mixed with a Greek descent. It was Greek, and the mother was Irish and Scottish. So the mother took on to, so the father, so it would be Irish, and so the son took on to the Irish. But Greek has Levi in it, and so if there was any portion of that Gentile descent, because these 10 tribes were in there, that was pulled out, because that is how this sort of attraction works in the first place. And so, first off, the Irish are very much an Israelite descent, but the Scottish, I believe they have a lot more Egyptian, they have, I think one of them has a lot more Egyptian, and then that makes the other one have a little bit more Hebrew in a sense. And so I believe it's the Scottish with a little bit more Hebrew, and that's why it pulls it out already. But then the Levi means joint or to attach. And these 10 tribes specifically, there's some 4 tribes that are more potent. Dan is to judge, Asher is one who is happy, Naphtali is my struggle, and there is another one, and so essentially, um, that descent is to join to that Israelite 10 tribes, right? That is almost like a description, a job description of sorts, and how this lineage of mine, when it came to the Americas, how they made it. And then my dad, um, or no, my grandpa at this point, he um, so that was my great grandpa who had that kid. And my grandpa, he mated with someone who was Cornwallish. If you know anything of the Cornwallish, they are British, but are of the poor that stayed, and they are typically not of these Israelite descents. What that means is, um, not the Israelites from the Roman Empire, because Israelites mixed with the Egyptians. And so of these poor, these Cornwallish, they are more, because the Egyptian or the Hebrew tend to be of that, not stature, but in that position, whether intentionally or indirectly. That is just how this tends to work. And so these Cornwallish are of that sort of descent. And then um, my and then her mother was Irish and Scottish as well, and so she took on to the father, which or she was like only 3%, but that was the lineage. That's what I know. And so the father took on to the Irish and Scottish, and so it would possibly be the Irish, um, into just a speculation. Um, and wait, yeah, because the mother was Irish and Scottish of that father, and so it would be her father, which would be Irish. And so, um, and so with my dad, he had mated with my mom, and this is all from an unconscious standpoint with my dad. My grandpa was a Knights of the Columbus member. I know that is Freemasonry, and all that fun jazz. But what am I to say? Um, you know, um, I mean, that's not what my dad aligned with, but my dad dealt with problems from his dad, and I was separated from that, even though I dealt with it, and that physically I'm sort of separated by that, by this last mixture in a sense or another, but more so by foster care and circumstance. Um, I was able to deal with other tribulations that made me go beyond that. And when I got back, I didn't go back with my dad. It still has issues, but everybody has their own level of progress. And so it's not a matter of issue in him, it's a matter of level of progress. And so it's all relative. But I went back with my mom and dealt and deal with whatever comes my way. And I've dealt with a lot of things, a lot of people have. And what it comes down to is it gets easier. And it's all relative, but it feels great when you begin to accept it, and it's a tool. It really is. And so my mom, essentially, she is Irish over Scottish over Scandinavian, and so all these are very much these 10 lost tribes of Israel. And so these Irish and Scottish pulls that out. The Scandinavian pulls it out further. And so that was the last fruition to join those together, which makes sense. And but I would take from the Scottish. And so um, because I already had Scottish from those other two that were already aligned with this Israelite descent, that because I would take that from my mom, that it is a different correspondence from my dad and his father. So if there was a Freemasonry from his father and there may be problems from him, that I can accept those, and those may be struggles, but um, it everything is a gift. everything you can learn from, everything you can go from. So no matter how you look at it, it's all a matter of perspective and it's all relative. And so I get really, really red because I'm Albanian. But, and I didn't get that until I was older, which was funny. And I didn't get, I was mostly pale, and like growing up, but I get more pale now that I get tan. Because I get tan, I get more pale. What I mean by that is I lose my tan very quickly. If I go inside for a day, I'll lose my tan. But no matter what, I almost always lose my tan. And it's not an expectation. It is what it is. And so when I get cold, especially if I gain my tan, because I take niacin, which is very good. It's vitamin B3 and it inflames the skin. But some races depend on certain vitamins than others. It's funny that Black people actually could use more niacin than other races. So it brings out my red color every single day. If I am cold, people, I mean, my friend, when I brought it up, he was like, "Oh, well, you look kind of gray." I look purple. I look freaking purple because it's almost like I'm blue. And I used to get like blue when I was cold, but because I turned red, I turned freaking purple. It's kind of cool. It's kind of scary. I look almost dead, but it's not like, I wouldn't say like I am dead and whatnot. That's relative. But like, I think it's interesting. I think it's cool. It's a matter of embracing whatever you get out of life. And there is a lot of things that you can take of, that you can say that these things in which you feel the urge to portray because you feel that people can use it, that's all relative. That even that feeling, even the relationship of things, that things that come at you, it's all a matter of learning from and that growing from. And it's very beautiful, not only the way it comes at you, but the options it not only shows you to give it, but the outcomes that come out of that. And it's like a beautiful path that just flows itself out. And that's why I'm very thankful for this kind of knowledge and this kind of opportunity and path. And I don't have any problems with the Jews. I don't have any problems with any sort of people. It's all relative to how you shape yourself, because no matter how much ideology, how much you've been given, you are given so much opportunity and so much power to embrace yourself and go beyond it and teach yourself from your own reality. It's almost like the reality within the fantasy comes alive. And if you want to find the truth, if you want to grow, like I was pushed to want to, not like, I felt like there was a lot of problems from foster care. I felt there was a lot of problems for me. I accepted that part, but I accepted that there was also other problems there, and that I needed to accept my part fully to be able to accept their part fully and grow from that and separate myself from that. And I did that in the system, but even though since tribulations came along after I left the system, that I did it in a fruitious stance way more when I left, because it was almost like a reaction from the internal space because I was doing that. But it wasn't a matter of they were in the wrong or anything. There's a lot of problems with the systems that be. But it is a matter of accepting your own circumstance from your own causality, and that you have the power to change it, that it can come from inside, and that you are very much in control. And that once you accept your own stance and accept your own growth, that there is stuff that you are to learn, and that if you are gaining knowledge base and you bring that all away, because you want to grow. You get to the point to where I don't want all these problems anymore. I'm so willing to change myself, to change my circumstance. Just being that openness is a very thing that can start it up. And I've had that so many times. That was a shakeup within foster care. But it wasn't until after foster care, even dealing with things and already being of that stance, that it came to fruition that when problems arise, and they may not be of your doing, that if you are to process all these things at once, that you need to come into acceptance that people will do their own things and do their own actions from their own perspective of their level of reasoning, and that you need to slow yourself down, and that you need to deal with it concisely, even though it may be an issue, and that it's a form of unconditional love, because they deserve that, because you feel you deserve that from whatever stance or circumstance or whatever, that if you want that, you got to start circulating it. You feel that growth and you want it so bad. That is what comes into fruition. I'm going to go to the bathroom. I will pause this and be right back. All right. Thank you, guys. So yeah, you need to grasp your own power and just be glad that all these things come at you and that you can deal with them. Whether it's a tribulation of knowledge, a tribulation of experience, a tribulation of wisdom, whatever path that comes at you, you know that it came at you because you can deal with it, and that's why it came at you. And that the way you've dealt with it, that even that teaches teaches you something. It teaches you knowledge and experience and wisdom. It teaches you how you can grow and what is the parts to grow from. Just looking at the aspects from a bird's eye view, from an unbiased standpoint, just studying things as they could be. That you look at every action, not an excuse. Just well, you could see that from this perspective of what it is, or that it is that, or this or that. And there is no bias, there is no judgment. Just point out, dwell, and just look at it. Just use the eyes that have the sight to see and the ears to hear. Those with the sight to see and the ears to hear, and those are usually speaking of the Israelites in these passages. But if they can see and hear, and there are those that come out that can't, that those who come out in a lineage that can be stated as can't, that they have those that can see and hear. And that it's all a matter of growth. And it's just a matter of taking it in, how you can take it in, and acceptance. It is a matter of taking in that of which is of your highest self, and that's relative to the person that is sitting in that seat. And whatever brings you to do that, whatever path you've already been on, just use your own knowledge and understanding to come into a fruition that is true to you, and it'll reshape that. Just be open to the truth. Just be open for the highest self, and the highest self of all, highest good of all. And you will be well on your path to coming to fruition with the manifestations in which you want, in which you need, in which are there for you, and which are waiting for you to open and knock on that door, And again, reference the door 101. That door is the thing that you fear the most, because you need to accept that, because there is no fear. It is a very physical thing. And that if you're already of that state beyond and that state above, that you need to be of this higher frequency, and that you use that to state that love is that higher frequency, and you need to love yourself in a form of self-respect and self-love to give a sort of respect and love to others, whether they are deserving or not, because they have that pure part in them no matter what. And that you are to pass on that you can take that on and go beyond the thing that makes you fear, whatever it is, that makes you want to be unconscious. Because unconsciousness is the root and cause of all error. Because sin in itself, the root definition of sin is error. And the cause of all error is within the human realm is unconsciousness, because we are consciousness. And so if it is unconsciousness and unconsciousness is error, then it's no wonder that the child of light, the soul, the consciousness is in which you truly are, which you can truly embody if you align yourself with that and go for that. That is pure. That is a lack of error. And that when you align with yourself with that, that no matter how far you reach for that, they say that you can't reach it and whatnot, that you can't reach God, that perhaps God is a higher state, but even in the structure of things that they claim to put themselves above them, that he allows that. And that if you put yourself under him, that you can still be a child alongside him. You can be that child of light. So align yourself with your own truth, your own love that is unconditional, that aligns with your own truth and your own understanding and what you have a passion for, which you can unravel whatever mysteries it tends to hide and create your own reality and manifest from the chaos that may reign, that may be scattered, because the order already resides within it. And you seeing that, you being in love and passionate, because the thing that's in fear, it isn't fear, that is that consciousness that's waiting to be opened, that has that limit, has that shield right in front of it, that once you tear that veil, you're beyond grateful for it, and that it's a form of preparation to take not only you beyond and the relations you have beyond, but anyone who wishes to align themselves with the best intentions one way or another, when you pick up on that, they will. And so if you try to align that with them, however way you can, see the ways that it doesn't, and align yourselves with the way it does, that lies within that. So I want to leave this message, and tell you to love yourself, love your neighbors, bring yourself up, bring your neighbors up by bringing yourself up, bring the world up by bringing your neighbors up, and dwell on. Keep on flowing, guys. I want you to share, like, comment, and subscribe, and